G'day everyone, my name's Cautious Pancake, and today I want to try and build a base that will prevent loot bags from despawning. As a bit of background, loot bags are configured to disappear after 20 minutes of real time, regardless of your game settings. For the default setting of 60-minute days, the Horde night should be around 15 minutes, which means that you should have time to get the loot bags after Horde, but when you add in a little bit of extra time for cleaning up zombies after 4 AM, and maybe a bit of time to clean out your inventory to make space for all the looting you need to do, then it's easy to start to see Horde bags disappearing before you get a chance to loot them. This gets worse if you're playing on longer days. At the 90-minute day setting, Horde night will be around 22.5 minutes long, so any loot bags spawned early in the night are going to disappear while you're still fighting off the Horde. To fix this, modding is obviously an option, and there's a few different mods out there on Nexus mods and 7 Days to Die mods, which are quite simple mods as they only need to overwrite the entity loot container time stay after death value from 1200, which is the standard value in seconds, and set it to whatever you want. For example, 1800 would make the despawn after 30 minutes instead of 20. Of course, this can impact game performance, so treat it with a little bit of caution. Modding isn't always an option though, so let's see what we can do to make loot bags never despawn in an unmodded game. Before we get to building though, we need to talk about the mechanic that I want to take advantage of. If you've seen my previous video on loot bags, then you'll know that if you get too far away from a loot bag, then the despawn timer for it is paused, meaning that it will remain indefinitely, at least until you get back within range, when the timer will then restart. What I've not done before though, is try and work out exactly at what distance the timer stops. So to do that, here we have a makeshift range, where I've also modded the game to have loot bags despawn after 5 seconds, so that there's a lot less waiting around. I've also modded Mo to always drop a loot bag, and as you can see, these always drop, and always despawn after 5 seconds. From there, it's just a case of moving back down the range to find the distance at which the loot bag will no longer disappear. At 80 blocks, the loot bag disappears as normal, nothing special there. At 90 blocks, the zombie is still visible, but at 91 it's not. I'm not aware of anything that's configurable to affect that, so I think that's the same for everyone, but let me know if consoles or your PC version is different. With a scope though, it's still visible and the loot bag still despawns. This doesn't change at both 100 and then 110 blocks as well. At 120 blocks, we run into a new behavior, where the zombie is no longer visible through an 8x scope. So we'll now have to switch up the testing approach. The easiest way to continue is to now use the detached camera. While leaving my body back on the 120 block line, we can kill the zombie still easily from here. I could have used a trap or something similar at distance, but this works just as well. The loot bag, as you can see though, still despawns as expected. At 130 blocks, we hit another issue. After spawning the zombie, it no longer remains in place. And after a bit of fine tuning, it looks like 125 blocks is the limit. Beyond that, the zombies despawn. So I feel like at this point, we're getting close. So we need to change up our testing approach. We'll still kill the zombie whilst using the detached camera, but we now need to quickly jump back into our body and run backwards to the 130 block mark to test whether the despawn still occurs at that point. And sure enough, it looks like that when we run back to 130, the loot bag no longer despawns, so it looks like 130 blocks is the magic number that we're looking for. So how can we use this new fact? Well, the challenge now becomes how to move a loot bag from where they drop to 130 blocks away from the player. Unfortunately for us, 7 days isn't the same as satisfactory, and we don't have access to conveyor belts to shuffle things along. My original plan was to use garage doors to slide the loot bag along a few blocks as it retracted, but I forgot about the fact that the doors don't actually exist while they're moving, so the bag falls straight through to the ground as soon as the garage door starts to shift. Next, I went for the one door that I know is solid while moving, and that's the drawbridge. The plan then is that the loot bags could fall on top of the drawbridge while it's down, and would flick them back to the next one when it opens up. And then that one would flick it onto the next one, and so on. Now, apart from the fact that many of you thinking that the wiring and the timers for that are probably difficult if not impossible, it also has another problem, and that's that the bags sometimes don't make it to the next drawbridge. and when resting on the edge of the first one, fall down when it closes. This would mean that using this approach would need a lot of drawbridges under drawbridges to try and catch the loot bag when it drops through each level, which just doesn't seem practical. That, I think, just leaves ramps as the next most likely option to check. Doing some quick testing with ramps to see what gradient loot bags would slide on, it's pretty clear that unfortunately the 45-degree ramps are no good, as the loot bag pretty much just stops in its tracks. These would have been great, as it would be a 1-to-1 ratio, moving across one block for every one block we go down. The 60-degree wedges are the next best option, I think, where we do get a nice sliding bag. And while I did try a mixed combination of ramps and wedges, and it does kind of work, it doesn't actually seem to gain as much in terms of distance, at least over the short testing ramps here. Only a couple of blocks on this run, which although this would add up over a larger distance, it's also a lot harder to construct, switching between those two block types. So to keep things simple, I'll stick with the 60-degree wedges and use them to see if we can slide loot bags 130 blocks away from our fighting position. Remembering that's the distance between where I stand and where the bags end up, not where the zombies are killed or anything. Without further ado, here's what I came up with. This monstrosity of a build features a giant ramp that goes from bedrock to just short of the max build height limit. On the top of the ramp, there's just enough room for a simple horde base before it does hit the build limit. It's not possible to build any higher than this. The base is left open just so that it's easier to see what's going on. Obviously you could enclose it, but keep in mind that would mean dropping the ramp height a block or two just for the roof to fit on. The idea is that the zombies will run up this massive ramp staircase, then cross over to this pole section, allowing for whatever mixture of traps, turrets and sniper action that you want to use to thin out the zombies. Any zombie that falls off should be able to return to the top through this little escape on the side of the ramp, and that's pretty much it. And of course, if everything works as planned, the loot bag should fall down onto the giant slide below, then make their way all the way to the bottom to collect in a nice little pile for us to pick up at the end of the horde. With that being said, let's bring on the zombies and see how it goes. So with Horde Night over, while we wait for time to pass and make sure that it's been at least 20 minutes since the last loot bag was generated, let's talk about the base and some of the issues with it. Firstly, and most obviously, building a base this large is pretty impractical during a normal game. Even in creative, it's not a quick build, so for the time and material investment required to build this, it's pretty much a non-starter. On top of that, with the sheer height of the build, it takes ages for the zombies to run up. Note that I went with a ramp so that I didn't have any dogs or direwolves undermining the ladders, and it took the zombies at least 40 minutes in game to get to the top, which really limits the amount of zombies that you can get. For a base that's designed to preserve loot bags, having so few zombies to fight means that you don't get as many loot bag chances, which kind of defeats the purpose. Another drawback is ramp repair. It turns out that zombies can fall off and slide down this ramp a little further than I was planning for, so this means that they have to jump climb back up to the exit point. Along the way, they damage the ramp a bit at points, which would be tedious to repair. Extra exit points could be added to mitigate this, but this just adds to the build complexity. And lastly, due to the sheer distance between me and the zombies, not all of the zombies wanted to run up, which again also limits the loot bag chances and isn't ideal. But on the plus side, now that the last loot bag from up top has despawned, when we come to check the end of the ramp, you can see that there's a nice little pile of loot bags waiting. They haven't despawned, despite it being well over 20 minutes since they were created. There's a small issue though. One blue bag is missing, and a couple of yellows at least are not there either. Whether these got stuck against the railing somewhere and then despawned, or possibly bounced over the railing and had the same result, I'm not sure. Regardless, I'm happy that the concept works. If you can get the loot bags 130 blocks away from you, it will successfully pause the despawn timer, keeping the loot bags there until you're ready to open them up. However, the challenge remains that there's no real practical way of building a base to do this, at least at the moment. So for now, if you want to keep your loot bags, maybe just go with a mod. Please give me a thumbs up if you found this useful, and consider subscribing if you'd like to see more of my 2.0 videos in the future. Massive thanks as always to my patrons for their support. Thanks to you for watching this video, and happy looting!